The following episode is brought to you by Studio Headphones. They're really awesome headphones. Go get you some at studio.com. And if you use the promo code WHATCAST, it's 15% off.
So there's a case that's famous, but I don't think it's famous enough. It's well known, but not well studied. And that's the famous Rendlesham Forest case, which we've covered many times on this show.
I wouldn't say many times. I think we've covered it as part of the military UFO thing that we did. And then I think other than that, it's just been references.
Who knows at this point?
Actually, I think we have talked about the James Peniston thing where he touches the spaceship and he gets all the binary code in his brains.
Yeah, and that was one of the most convincing parts of the whole story.
I tend to think otherwise.
Really? You don't
Yeah.
I thought it was weird that somebody can remember binary code. That actually means something.
Yeah, who's to say he remembered it though? According to him, he wrote it in a notebook and said that he was able to retain it. But I guarantee if you asked him now, he wouldn't be able to retain it. And who's to say he wrote it on the day he touched it or whatever? He could have figured out what these things meant. He might have been familiar with Hy-Brasil and looked up where the coordinates approximately would be on the map and put that in the binary code, and then for continuous planetary advancement or whatever the hell it said. Just sounds like something that a creepy alien thing would say. You know, it's just because it's in his notebook doesn't mean it was given to him by aliens.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because it kind of pertains to everything we talk about. Because when you talk about this case and his binary code, for those who haven't heard about this case, it's a English occupied military base, an Air Force base in England.
It's a dual military base between the U.S. and the British Armed Forces. It's called the RAF Bentwaters, and the other one is
Woodbridge.
Woodbridge, yeah. So the Woodbridge side is the side that was being used by the U.S. and it was an event that occurred over two separate nights. The first night was December 26th in 1980, and there was a light that was seen in the sky, and it looked like it came down and landed in the woods in Rendlesham Forest. So the servicemen on base sent out a crew to go look and see what landed in the forest. And Jim Peniston and one other guy, I can't remember his name, but they came up into this clearing and they saw this triangular shaped craft, and it was kind of hovering above the ground, and they said it was floating through the woods. It wasn't stationary at first, and so they were following it, and then it stopped. And according to Jim Peniston, while this thing was in the forest, all the animals on a nearby farm were going nuts and just freaking out, like, you know. And it's something that we've heard a lot in cases with weird things, that animals will freak out. And so this could be part of a story, just to kind of be like, it was a weird event and animals were freaking out. Or maybe it was indicative of something weird happening. But this is, again, according to Jim Peniston. But let me say this about Jim Peniston. He is a sergeant in the Army, so that shows at least some level of dedication if he was able to go through the ranks and get promoted. And so, you know, I don't want to, there's nothing to suggest that he is a bullshitter, and it doesn't seem like he's really gaining anything from this, but the story does seem kind of far out. But as they were following this craft, the craft came to a halt, and they walked up to it. And engraved on the surface was these symbols that Sergeant Peniston wrote in his notebook. He did a sketch of these weird symbols, which kind of look like what you'd think of a generic alien language hieroglyph thing might look like.
Mm-hmm. It's very generic looking.
Yeah. Which, that's not to say it's not authentic. It just looks like what you would expect a generic alien spaceship to have in some movie from that period in time. I'm just saying. But then he reached out and he touched the craft, and once he touched the craft is when he got all these ones and zeros in his head, which he says he wrote down in his notebook, and then later figured out that it was binary code and translated it, and he got these coordinates for High Brazil, which is like this. It's kind of, I guess, to generalize, it's the Irish equivalent of Atlantis. But it was supposed to be this island with like magical enlightened beings or something. So that disappeared. But it's said that it comes back every now and again, like it's magic or maybe multi-dimensional. I don't know. But like I said, maybe he was just familiar with that in mythology and was able to incorporate that just to be like, nobody knows about this. So this all went down around 3 in the morning, and an hour later, the local police were called, which seems kind of weird because this is a military base. Yeah. Why would they bother calling the police?
Yeah, that is very, very weird. They just called the cops. Well, I don't know what to do. Just call the cops.
Yeah. What do we do? There's a UFO. I don't know. Call the cops. It's not like we're the military or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the cops show up, and they're looking around, but according to the police report, the only lights that they see were from the Orford Ness Lighthouse, which was a few miles away. And this is something that a lot of the skeptics cling to, that the police only saw lights from the lighthouse, and that they claim that's all the soldiers saw as well. But if you really think about it, the soldiers have been on this base for a while. It's not like they just showed up that day and are like, oh my God, it's a UFO. So they're aware that the lighthouse is there. It's a light they would have seen. So to say that on this night they saw the lighthouse and think it's a UFO, it's silly. It's really just trying to grasp at straws.
But see, that leads me back to the point I was going to make. I forgot to make earlier because I'm awesome. But when it comes to stuff like this guy's binary code and people's testimony with things like that, these guys are soldiers. These are professionals. Their job is to be a soldier, to know their surroundings, especially if these guys are guarding a base. So they know their surroundings. And are we kind of throwing expert testimony to the wind these days? Because this story has been covered everywhere, and they've had like a testimony from binary code specialists, and they're saying there's no way that this guy can, spit out this message in this binary code. He'd have to be a specialist in binary codes, and he's had no training in it. He said he doesn't know what binary code was before this happened. Because there's people are going to say it was the lighthouse, and these guys have been there. They know the surroundings. It's obviously not the fucking lighthouse.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a loaded question, because I don't think it's necessarily throwing out expert testimony. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that people saw something. I think what's in doubt is what that really was and what the perception was. So just because you are in the military, or just because you are a police officer, or just because you're a politician, does that make you any more credible as a witness to an extraordinary event than your average Joe? I mean, you could have someone that nobody knows, that's Joe Smith, who just so happens to be a self-taught nuclear physicist, who just reads lots of books, knows lots of shit, and might be more inclined to speak on certain matters, but no one's going to listen to him over Doofus von Doofenheim, the police officer. So it's, just because you're in the military and because you have to go through military training, does that necessarily mean that you're more capable of making sense out of some sort of thing that you are unfamiliar with? I don't necessarily think so. There's, and before I say this, I want to say that I'm not saying that I'm not painting with a broad brush here, but people are not universally smart. And in the military, you're going to get smart people. You're going to get dumb people. And who's to say that some of these people weren't, or maybe even just one of these people wasn't very bright and wasn't perceptive and was just kind of lazy at their job. When it comes to these sort of things, it's really hard to really understand what someone is perceiving because it's such a personal thing. So you could see a light in the sky. Like, I remember as a kid, I always looking at the sky, and just one night I happened to see Venus. Venus has always been in the sky, and I always looked at the sky, but just one night Venus stood out to me, and I was convinced that it was a UFO. So every night I started looking out my window and I would see it. So I started convincing myself, like, maybe this thing was watching me. So one day I called my mom and I'm like, look, it's that UFO that hovers outside my window every night. And she looks and she's like, no, that's Venus. It's always been there.
I did the same thing.
And I'm like, oh man, I was so let down. And I was a kid, so obviously I don't know what's going on, but ignorance can go across ages. You don't know what you're looking at, and you see something that to you is out of the ordinary. You don't know what to say it is, and things get blown out of proportion. All that being said, this event in particular is this one does seem to have a lot more evidence than most, and I don't think that this case is one of those cases where witness testimony is being thrown out. I think that's a lot of what this case has to go on, because here we have a sergeant, but later there's the deputy base commander witnessed something, and this is the second in command on the base. He was a lieutenant colonel, and on the second night he witnessed something. So and after this, the first incident, on the morning of December 26th, they sent more servicemen out to collect a small clearing, or to collect samples from the small clearing where the craft was. And they said that they saw broken branches and burn marks on nearby trees and impressions on the ground in a triangular pattern. So there was actually physical evidence that something happened.
And all commonplace with UFO touchdown, right? Yeah.
So for some reason, yet again, they called the local police to come check out the scene. And so they showed them the impressions, and the police just said it was probably made by an animal.
A big triangle animal.
Yeah, just dug in a triangular pattern by coincidence.
Now, do you think these guys could be being a little tricky here? Do you think they're getting a secondary official report of these happenings?
The witnesses?
Yeah, these soldiers who are seeing this stuff. Do you think they're calling a cop so they can have some other official type people report what's going on?
That's not something that I had considered previously, but that could be the case. Maybe they just wanted a non-military group with some sort of authority to be witness to it, or to have record of it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
That's something that would definitely cross my mind if I was in that situation.
But you'd have to think, if it was something that the military was going to try to cover up, then it seems like they wouldn't even let the cops on the base. But
very true.
I don't know. So that was just the first night. The sightings continued 2 nights later on December 28th. But as I mentioned before, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt he was the second in command, and he had his own experience. So he was going to visit the site to take radiation readings of the triangle depressions in the clearing. And he was using a standard issue military radiation reader. And he said that they recorded 0.07. Basically, it was a low level he recorded low levels of radiation. And it was just slightly higher than the surrounding area, which would be considered background radiation. And it was only slightly higher than what was in the back. But they said that they did notice a slight spike a half mile away from the landing site, which is kind of weird. So they went over to investigate the spike that they were reading, and they saw a flashing light that was seen across the field. That would be close to the farmhouse that I mentioned earlier where the animals were freaking out. So across this field is where the farm is, and they see this flashing light. And it looked like what was described by the witnesses on the first night, this blinking light in the sky before it landed. And just to clear up a bit about the lighthouse excuse, this flashing light was seen in the field to the east. The lighthouse is also in the east, but it's further to the east, and it would be in the same line of sight as this blinking light. So just something to keep in mind. But Lieutenant Holt had an audio recorder with him, so he was recording the events as they take place. And you can look that up on YouTube and actually hear the tape, because it was something he didn't turn in. He had it with him. But you can hear him and his crew as they're going through, and he's kind of describing what they're seeing. But he says that he sees these 3 lights in the sky. There's one in the north, or there are 2 in the north, 1 in the south. And then he saw this light hovering through the woods. And he said it looked like an eye that was dripping molten metal as it was floating through the woods. And then he said a beam of light shot down at their feet from the sky. And then the light disappeared. And he gets all that on audio. So if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend checking that out. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. What else has it been on? It's been on fucking everything. It was probably on Ancient Aliens at some point, I'm sure.
There's a really good Unsolved Mysteries episode on the whole experience.
Oh, is there? Nice.
Yeah.
So a lot of the explanations about this were the lighthouse. There's even some scientists that are claiming the star-like lights that Holt said he saw in the sky were just bright stars. Star-like lights were stars. What? But Holt actually ended up sending a letter out, and he sent it to the Ministry of Defense, and he sent it directly to them. So he went over his superior's head to get this out, which, you know, in the military is a big no-no. You don't go over your supervisor's head. But he did it because he wanted to make sure that somebody was aware of what happened. So, I mean, you have all this stuff that went on, and it's 2 nights worth of stuff. There's audio recordings. There's witness testimony. Holt and Peniston are the 2 most famous, I guess. But there's other people that were involved that saw it that have also said that they've been told that they've kind of been roughed up and told nothing happened. And it's enough people, I think, saw it and have been able to corroborate what they saw, that I believe something happened.
Yeah, there was, on the second night, after much pestering, they got the dude in charge to agree to set up floodlights so that if that thing came back, they would be able to see it easily. So there was a bunch of people who saw this molting eyeball floating around the trees. By no means was it just these 2 guys, Holt and what's his fuck?
Peniston?
Yeah, there's many other people who witnessed this stuff.
Yeah, but there were a couple witnesses that did kind of go against what people were seeing. One guy said that he saw the lights and he thought they were coming from past the forest, beyond where the forest was, because nothing was visible when he passed by the forest earlier, but he could still see this blinking light. So they saw a glowing that was near near where the light would be, the lighthouse. And he said as they were going in that direction, they saw what the light was actually just a farmhouse with all the lights on.
See, I heard that they chased this light towards a farmhouse.
No, that was a different guy. So there's a set of witnesses that are saying it was actually just the lit up farmhouse. That's what the light was. They saw the light from the lighthouse, and then they saw this other glow, so they were approaching it, and then they found that the glow was the house.
Oh, wow. I didn't know the reports varied so wildly.
Yeah, well, this is just one group of, and maybe it's just one guy, actually.
Okay.
But then there's the John Burroughs, he was the one that was with John Peniston, and he said that they were following it, going in the direction of the farmhouse, and that's when they were going through the woods and they came upon the vehicle or whatever in the woods. But in addition to all the animals making noise, he also said that they heard this sound like a woman screaming. And Halt also claimed 2 nights later that he heard the same noises. But skeptics are saying that it was a type of deer. And as we all know, deer can be scary as shit.
Yes, they can make some horrible sounds.
They're terrifying, and they can sound like somebody screaming, or perhaps a demon or a pterodactyl. It's hard to say, but their screams sound like they want to eat your soul in any event. So, it could be, or maybe it was an alien, or maybe it was a woman screaming who was being abducted by an alien,
or an alien being assaulted by a woman.
There you go. She was sick of it. She's like, "You will not abduct me, sir." And then she screamed. Or maybe she just kicked him in the balls and that was the alien screaming.
Yeah.
Let's go with that one.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Poor alien balls.
Hey, man, he shouldn't have tried to abduct her. Brought it on himself.
Yeah, that's true. Poor guy. You got to think twice.
Yeah. So, you know how we've talked about in the past how planets make sounds?
Yes. Creepy sounds, I might add.
Yeah, really, like the songs of Saturn. I wonder if UFOs also make sounds if you've got the right equipment to hear it.
You'd have to have some pretty awesome equipment.
Yeah. I bet the guys at Bentwaters and Woodbridge, if they had some really sweet studio headphones, maybe they'd be able to pick that up. But unfortunately for them, studio wasn't around back then. Not in the 50s. Not in 1980. So, it sucks to be you guys in the past because Mateo and I have some fucking sweet studio headphones.
And we do listen to aliens with them.
We do. We can't tell you what they say because it's highly classified. But we can do the next best thing and we can tell you how you can get your own pair, and not only get your own pair of really sweet headphones where you can hear aliens, but you can get a discount on those headphones. So if you go to studio.com and use the promo code WHATCAST, you will get 15% off your headphones. Please note, studio headphones cannot make you hear aliens. Mateo and I are just 2 crazy individuals that are listening to our own thoughts, and it's probably aliens.
So there's been kind of a new development as far as this story goes. I don't even know if we said this took place in 1980, right?
Yeah. Yep. 1980.
So there's been kind of a new development. I found an article that talked about Rendlesham, and they're saying that it's been debunked. Now, when I sent you, I saw this article. I saw that. I sent it to you right away, and I'll admit I didn't read it because I wanted to hear your full Joe Nickel inspired fury.
I wouldn't say it was. I didn't blame barn owls. And this case is not barn owls, friends. This is not barn owls.
We're safe here.
Yeah. The article, it was put out by Dr. David Clark, who's a British UFO researcher. And he was reporting this claim that the entire incident was set up by the, what's her name? The Special Air Service, which I will refer to as SAS, but I just wanted to let you guys know what SAS stood for. So they were, in August of 1980, the SAS had a group of men that were parachuting into RAF Woodbridge to test the security because it's a nuclear site. So they're parachuting in, and apparently the Air Force had recently upgraded the radar, and they were able to detect the men as they were parachuting into the base. So they were captured, interrogated, allegedly beaten up, and they were referred to as unidentified aliens. Which in this regard, I'm thinking they're meaning like outsiders rather than aliens from outer space.
Who were these guys who were parachuting in? And was it our own soldiers? And if so, why were they beating them up?
No, they were British soldiers.
Ah.
And I think it was because they were just, it wasn't a mission that was told to the U.S. soldiers at Woodbridge. And according to the story, this group just came in unannounced. So while they're being captured, I'm sure they got roughed up because they're unidentified people coming into a nuclear site. That's kind of a big deal, especially considering you're parachuting in.
Yeah, I don't buy this story just based on that alone. I mean, it's a nuclear site. They would have shot those guys as they fell to the earth. That would have started World War III. I mean, these guys are sharing a fucking base here.
Yeah, but the story goes on that this group of men wanted to get revenge, and since they were called unidentified aliens, they decided to do some alien type of shenanigans. So they set up lights and colored flares in the woods, and they had black helium balloons that were used in conjunction with remote controlled kites to carry things in the sky that would be activated by a remote control. And they had all these lights, and it was like this whole thing to try to get back at the U.S. soldiers. But Dr. Clark, for the article that he put out, in order to get both sides of the story, he contacted one of the Special Air Service snipers that would have been active at the time the incident occurred. And he also spoke with the U.S. base commander, who was the commander at the time of the incident. His name's Colonel Ted Conrad. And both parties claim that the idea that this prank could have actually happened is highly unlikely due to the security considerations at the time on the base. Mm-hmm. Well, really, I mean, at any time, it's a nuclear base. So yeah. You always have to be at high alert and make sure that, that would be a little too big, I think. A little too big of a deal to fuck around and try to pull shenanigans like this.
I'd have to agree with that. We all saw how the military responded to a supposed UFO in the battle for Los Angeles. That could have been terrible.
So I don't know. I think that it's very likely that something actually happened here.
Yeah, if that's that dude's story, that's a far cry from having the Rendlesham case being debunked. So I don't know. I think it's somebody just making a grab.
Yeah, or maybe it's a cover-up. Maybe, or disinformation works in a lot of ways. Maybe it's just a way to muddy the waters. Just be like, oh no. So you're giving the skeptics more ammo.
Well, see, part of me says that. Part of me asks why they would bring up Rendlesham. Yeah, I mean, nobody's really talking about it. It hasn't been. It's not really focused on that much. It's something you'll come across reading about UFOs, but I don't know, maybe with how the way things are going with leaks and people being outed because of certain things that they're trying to cover their tails now with the whole Rendlesham thing. Who knows?
Well, I think I would be more inclined to consider the idea of a hoax if this maybe was the only time this happened, but it's not. So the same airbase, not the Woodbridge side, but the Bentwater side, it had an event that happened back in the 50s. Have you ever heard about that?
Not at all. And for some reason, it's always escaped me that this was a nuclear base. So it's interesting to hear of 2 cases of supposed UFOs coming to visit these places, because that's commonplace too. We hear about that a lot.
Yeah. It happened in the U.S. a lot in the 60s. But this one happened August 13th, 1956. And at approximately 9:30 at night, radar operators at the base saw a target show up. It appeared on the radar similar to what a regular aircraft would look like on the radar. And it was approaching the base from the ocean at what they were recording to be several thousand miles per hour.
Whoa.
At the same time, they tracked another group of targets that was moving slowly towards the northeast. And as they were going across the radar field, they merged together to form a single, very large spot on the radar. They said that the return they got on the radar was larger than what would be seen on their largest bombers or their transport aircraft.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So it was, they said it was, and it was a group of aircraft that formed together to make this. So it's clearly a transformer. But there was some interceptors that were sent out. When they got up in the air, they weren't able to see any visual sightings of any aircraft at the time. But they did end up seeing this single, what they described as an amber star-like object. But that was most likely Mars. So Mars was in the direction they were flying, and it looks like a star, but it's amber in color. So that's, and this kind of proves my earlier point that it was they just reported seeing this amber star light and had no idea that it was Mars, but it was Mars. So that, it just kind of proves my point a little bit. But the target ended up, I shouldn't say ended up coming back, but another target was detected at almost 11 o'clock that night. And this time it was approaching the Bentwaters base from the east, and they estimated it was going between 2,000 and 4,000 miles an hour. And as it passed over where the base was, it disappeared from radar. But something to consider is that on military bases, ground-based radar will sometimes have a blind spot directly overhead. But once it flew over the base, it reappeared on the radar again in the west. But when even though they didn't see anything on the radar when it passed overhead, there was a rapidly moving white light that flew over.
Oh, so they physically saw it as it passed overhead? Okay.
And there was another pilot who was flying at 4,000 feet who reported that he saw a white light fly underneath his aircraft.
Wow.
At one point. Yeah.
Jeez.
So it was reported both from above and below. So they, Bentwaters base alerted another U.S. base, which was 40 miles away, called Lakenheath. And they notified them that something had been heading to their direction, and they wanted to be on the lookout. And apparently people that were on the ground at Lakenheath were able to see a bunch of bright objects fly overhead. And they said 2 of them, once they showed up, made a sharp turn and then kind of merged together before flying away. And they said they were angular in shape, and they're about the size, like if you were on the ground looking up, it would look like the size of a golf ball if you're holding a golf ball at arm's length.
Wow.
And as they watched them, they were able to see them until they kind of disappeared into a pinpoint of light.
Wow. So I guess my first question is, how do you read about Rendlesham and then not hear about this?
Yeah, this one barely gets any love at all. And it continued into the night, too. After this was witnessed, there was another group of interceptors that were sent up to follow one of these radar returns near Lakenheath. And one of the pilots apparently was able to catch up to this one of the crafts, but the craft ended up changing direction and flying behind him, and then it started chasing him for 10 minutes.
Oh.
And he said he was trying everything he could to evade it, and it was keeping pace with him without any problem and was following him for 10 minutes. And during this time, the second plane that was with him to intercept these craft was forced to return to the base because it started having engine problems.
Huh.
And on the ground, they were able to see the target on the radar for a short period of time, and then eventually it flew off to the north.
That's scary.
Yeah. To me, this is almost more impressive than the Rendlesham incident.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, something to consider, though, just so you guys get all sides of the story here, is during this period of time, it's the Perseid meteor shower. So there were a large number of shooting stars in the sky that night. Whether or not some of these were big enough and close enough to be picked up by radar, I can't say for a certainty. But according to the Condon Committee, there's nothing to see here. They did say that it's an unusual case because of the radar files, and they did acknowledge that there was apparently rational and intelligent behavior of the UFO, which suggests a mechanical device of unknown origin. So they did kind of acknowledge that this one was weird, but there's a well-known UFO skeptic, but he's also an aviation journalist named Philip Klass. And according to him, he thinks that the entire incident could be explained by a combination of false radar returns and misperceptions of the meteor shower.
That seems highly unlikely, especially with the detailed movements they traced on the radar.
Yeah. But there were other witnesses that came forward to confirm the stories of the pilots. There was a flight lieutenant named Freddie Wimbledon, and he backed up most of the story, and he also backed up the aircraft that was chased by the UFO. So he was the one that apparently directed the last team of interceptors that flew up, that the one that had to turn back and the other one that was being chased. And he kind of fought back against what Philip Klass was claiming. And he said that the incident involved a solid radar return that was tracked from 3 different sets of radar on the ground, and also on one of the aircraft that was attempting to intercept it. So it can't be chalked up to just a radar anomaly when you're getting the same thing on 4 different radar readings.
Yeah, I think you can definitely exclude a problem with the radar at that point.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got 2 incidents in the same place, and both had some sort of interaction with the military that was not hostile. So what's going on here, Mateo?
I have no idea. I mean, for me, obviously, this all has the same bullshit military excuses. I'm surprised I didn't hear the word flares when you were telling this story. So I think something's definitely going on there, and I think it's just the same old, same old. I think these things are checking out these nuclear bases, and they just, I mean, it's very much like the Battle for Los Angeles thing. I mean, they chased those things up and down the coast for a while. They were easily outmaneuvered. I mean, this is all familiar. This all has a very familiar ring. It's not a unique story by any means. It's your standard UFO flyby checkup on these nuclear power plants. I mean, we've heard about them turning the systems that are, running these nuclear things or whatever, just turning them off.
Yeah, there was the case where a entire base, all of the missiles on the base went into fire mode. They were in lockdown, and then they went into ready mode, and then the countdown started, and then everything just shut back down and went back into ready mode.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, that's a lot worse than just having it turn off.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But I've even heard of flyovers over nuclear power plants as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think they're definitely attracted to those types of bases, those types of places that have this nuclear shit in them. I think
they're probably just tourists. Like, look at how primitive they are. Look at that. They're using nuclear power. Nuclear power. Can you believe that? Yeah. We're using combustion engines too.
Don't laugh.
Don't laugh. We're still using combustion engines and fossil fuels.
So does this article steal any of the magic of the Rendlesham case for you, or does it retain its...
I think that's just one person, like all the people that have claimed to be the guy in the Bigfoot costume.
Mm-hmm.
There's Bob Hieronymus. He's like the main guy. But then there have been other guys who have also claimed to be that guy. And it's just... sometimes people just like a good story, and if they can insert themselves into it, all the better.
Yeah. I don't think this is a story that's being made up by a couple people. I think
this especially this first one, the first incident in 56 is pretty astounding.
Yeah,
I think, and then to have something happen again in 1980, it's I think there's more to it. Why you've got not only one but two military bases both times that witnessed these things.
Yeah, and if there was an incident in the 50s, you think that if it happened again in the 80s, there'd be something on record. Somebody running that place would know about it, but it seems like nobody knew about it. We didn't know about it. We've read all about Rendlesham.
Yeah, it is weird that this was something that isn't like you'd feel like this would be mentioned in conjunction with the Rendlesham Forest incident.
Oh yeah,
but it's largely untalked about.
Try as you may. You naysaying bastards. But for me, Rendlesham's still a UFO infested.
Rendlesham lives on forever. No, I don't think that story really takes in, especially when you've got two high-ranking officials on both sides of the story saying that the probability of that occurring is improbable. It's very unlikely. And most people, you'd have to think someone a group as disciplined as the Special Air Services would understand how serious it would be to fuck around with people on a nuclear base.
Yes.
It's not like it's just your chums at the rival school. This is a goddamn nuclear base. Show a little restraint, you sons of bitches.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.